Friends, before we dive into today's terrifying story, let me share something interesting with you. Almost 80% of the people who watch our videos enjoy them, but haven't subscribed yet. So, if you're one of those 80%, it'll just take a second. Hit that subscribe button below so you'll never miss our chilling tale. In a small coastal town in Spain, there is a cemetery where a bride still waits for her wedding day. Over 100 years ago, her groom never showed up. But people say, every few years, she finds someone new to take his place. And the last person who saw her never made it out of the cemetery alive. In Spain, along the coastline, there is a small hill town called San Lucia. White houses, narrow streets, and the sound of church bells ringing every hour. During the day, the town looks like something out of a postcard, almost like a painting. But at night, the air in San Lucia becomes strangely cold. This is the story of 19-year-old Mateo Guerrero, who had recently arrived in San Lucia from Madrid. Mateo was an architecture student who studied and documented the buildings of old European towns. The ancient church of San Lucia and its century-old houses were part of his research. San Lucia was beautiful, but strangely quiet. Mateo soon noticed something odd. As soon as evening arrived, people rushed back into their homes. No one stayed outside after dark. One evening, Mateo was researching the old cemetery next to the church. That's when he noticed something strange. Inside the cemetery stood a broken wedding arch beside one of the graves. It looked like a wedding ceremony had once taken place there, and then was suddenly abandoned. Dry flowers still hung from the arch, and the soil beneath it looked darker than the rest of the ground. Mateo didn't think much about it at the time, but that night, something strange began happening. Late that night, while Mateo was working in his guest house room, he heard a faint sound outside. Soft footsteps, like fabric brushing against stone. Mateo looked out the window. The street was empty, but at the end of the alley, he saw a white silhouette. It looked like a woman, wearing a long white gown. Mateo assumed it was probably just a tourist. The next night, the sound came again. This time, much closer. Mateo slowly opened the window. A cold gust of wind rushed into the room, even though it was the middle of summer. It felt as if someone had just walked past his guest house. On the stone street below, he noticed footprints in wet soil. And those footprints were leading straight toward the old cemetery. Curiosity got the better of him. Mateo decided to follow them. But before he could take a closer look, she disappeared. Soon he found himself standing inside the cemetery. The church bell rang in the distance. It was 2 a.m. The air inside the cemetery felt even colder. Walking past old crosses and gravestones, Mateo eventually reached the broken wedding arch, the same one he had seen earlier. And then, he saw her. A woman was standing beneath the arch. She was wearing an old white wedding gown. Her face was hidden behind a pale veil. It looked like she was waiting for someone. Mateo took one slow step forward. Suddenly, the wind stopped. The silence in the cemetery became so deep that he could hear his own heartbeat. The woman slowly turned toward him. Her veil lifted slightly, and what Mateo saw froze him in place. Her face was pale, unnaturally pale. Her eyes looked hollow and terrifying. Dark stains of dried blood ran down her cheeks, like she had cried tears of blood many years ago. Then Mateo noticed something even worse. Her feet weren't touching the ground. His entire body went cold, and before he could react, the woman suddenly vanished into the air. Mateo didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, when the old caretaker of the guest house arrived, Mateo asked him about the woman. At first, the old man refused to say anything. But when Mateo mentioned the wedding arch in the cemetery, the caretaker's face turned pale. He slowly said, "This story began in 1889. That year, a wedding was supposed to take place in San Lucia. The bride's name was Isabella Romero, and the groom was Javier Morales. They were known as the happiest couple in the entire town. Because the church was under renovation, the wedding ceremony was arranged beside the cemetery, right under that same arch. But on the night of the wedding, Javier never arrived. Later, people discovered that he had run away with another woman just hours before the ceremony. Isabella waited beneath the wedding arch all night. The night grew colder and colder, and before sunrise, she collapsed. Her heart had stopped. Some say the shock was simply too much for her. Isabella was buried in that same cemetery. But after that night, strange things began happening in San Lucia. Sometimes, late at night, people would see a woman in a white wedding gown standing beneath the arch, as if she was still waiting for her groom. The townspeople started calling her the dead bride. Hearing this story terrified Matteo, because the night before, he had seen her. That night, while Matteo was in his room, he heard the footsteps again. This time they stopped right outside his door. Then a strange smell filled the air. Wet soil and old flowers. Matteo slowly looked toward the door. Underneath it, he saw a shadow, as if someone was standing just outside. Then the door handle slowly began to move. Matteo's hands started shaking, and suddenly, the door creaked open. Matteo screamed, but there was no one there. The footsteps slowly faded away. But then Matteo noticed something else. Outside his window, the same terrifying woman was standing there, wearing the same white wedding gown, staring directly at him. And then, she vanished again. The next morning, Matteo went to the church and told the priest everything. The priest asked him something strange. When you first went to the cemetery, did you take anything from there? Suddenly Matteo remembered. He had picked up some dry flowers from the wedding arch. The priest's face grew serious. He said, "The spirit probably believes her groom has returned, and that groom is you." He told Matteo to leave the town immediately, or the spirit might never stop following him. Terrified, Matteo rushed back to the guest house to pack his bags. But when he arrived, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Wet footprints were on the doorstep, the same ones from the cemetery. The sky outside suddenly turned dark. Lightning flashed. The lights inside the house flickered. And then everything went black. Heavy rain began pouring outside. And then, with another flash of lightning, she appeared, standing right in front of Matteo. Matteo screamed in terror. The old caretaker, who had just arrived outside the house, looked through the window. Inside, Matteo was screaming, and in front of him stood a woman in a white wedding gown. The caretaker rushed inside, but by the time he reached the room, Matteo was gone. Hours later, Matteo's body was found in the cemetery, right beneath the broken wedding arch, covered in wet soil. After that night, the people of San Lucia believed something terrifying. The dead bride had finally found her groom, and she took him with her forever. If you like the story, please subscribe to our channel.